All right, so we were able to get the connection to go live on YouTube. If I'm going to have someone put a message on my page with the link to YouTube. Grace, if you could do that, put the, that would be very helpful for us. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm not, I don't want to wait any longer. I want to respect everyone's time for taking the time to join us today. So I welcome all of you and thank you for joining us for this very important conversation on rape, amplifying Nigeria's muted voices. I am your host, Ruth Yvonne Benson Idahosa. I am the founder and executive director at PATHFINDERS Justice Initiative, where our mission is to prevent sexual exploitation and sexual violence against women and girls, and also to provide support for survivors. So before we begin, I wanted to give a few house rules. You will notice that everyone is muted. If you're not muted, I'm probably going to mute everybody right now, but what I'm going to ask is that you please do not interrupt the speakers while they're speaking, because that will help us to decrease the amount of background noise. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the session. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or feel free to utilize the chat box. Let me just send a quick message on my Facebook page so that everybody knows where to go. Thank you for your patience. All right. Okay. All right, so once again, welcome to the conversation. It was prompted today by a quote that I read by Osai Ojigo of Amnesty International Nigeria last week. And in the quote, she says, "No matter where you are in Nigeria, in the north or the south, in the city or rural, Christian or Muslim, every woman, every girl is at risk of rape." Now, we know that rape is not a new development in Nigeria. We know that this is something that has been happening for such a long time. Let me just mute everybody because obviously we're having some issues here. If you can, please mute yourself. I'm trying to find a way to mute everyone. Okay, so we know that rape is not something that is new in Nigeria. This has been happening now for...
Славянский секс-шоп «Тихий омут». В наличии имеются всякие разные пиглулы, трехствольное дидло, Змей Горыныч для поругания.
For a very long time. According to the most recent statistics that I was able to find, 1 in every 4 girls, 1 in every 10 boys has been victimized by rape at some point during their childhood. That would mean 25 million girls, 10 million boys currently in Nigeria. Last year, in November of 2019, the Minister of Women's Affairs and Social Development noted that up to 2 million Nigerian women are raped every single year. And so we know that rape was already a pandemic prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I'm hopeful that this conversation will not, obviously it will not resolve the issue of rape, but I'm hoping that it will be a starting point for us, and that we will at least be able to have further discussions and be able and create a space for survivors to start to heal, where there can be more compassion that can start to flow. So I'm excited to introduce our panelists today. A special thank you to all of them for taking the time to join this very important conversation.
Allahu Akbar.
Okay. All right. All right. So for my panelists, I thank you so much for your time to join. Please forgive me as I'm going to be giving a very abridged version of your CV in an effort to ensure that we get to hear from as much of you as possible. Professor Yinka Omorogbe is an internationally recognized professor. She is the Minister of Justice of Edo State, as well as the Attorney General of Edo State. In addition, she is the chair of the Edo State Task Force Against Human Trafficking, which was set up by Governor Obaseki last year to address the menace of human trafficking in Edo State. Dr. Okei Odumakin is a women's rights activist and president of Women Arise for Change initiative. She has received multiple awards for her advocacy, including the International Women of Courage Award from the US State Department in 2013. Bishop Feb Idahosa is the president of Benson Idahosa University. He's a public health professional and educator, and also a bishop at Church of God Mission International. He's also a member of our board of directors at PATHFINDERS and an ally for women in this work. Doyle is an accomplished writer. She's an award-winning actor, producer, and presenter. Her career has spanned 2 decades with accomplishments that cut across stage, television, film, and print. Proudly, I would also like to add that she is one of our PATHFINDERS ambassadors. Chude Jideonwo is a Nigerian lawyer. He's an entrepreneur and journalist who has worked for many years in media, advertising, and public relations. He's also the founder of Joy Incorporated, whose mission is to increase the amount of joy in the world. I love that. Dr. Kemi Akintoyese is a clinical psychologist with considerable experience who is based in Lagos. She has worked with many of our survivors over the years and been able to bring them to a place of thriving. So particularly proud to have her on the call today as well. So welcome once again to all our panelists, and thank you for taking the time to join us. All right, so let me go over to, I think I'm going to start with Professor Yinka. Let's see if I can find you and unmute you. If you can unmute yourself, Ma. I think that what is front and center on the minds of everybody here today, right, is the status, at least, of the Uwaila Mozua investigation. For those of you who may not be aware, Uwa was a 22-year-old student of microbiology at Uniben. She was brutally raped and then murdered on May 28th of 2020. She in her local church, right, in Benin. She was a member of the choir there. She was also aiming to become a minister of the word of God. And so I take a moment just to give some background as to who she was, because I think it's important to acknowledge who she is, and the pain, and to bear witness to the pain that her family and the families of so many young women that we've heard of recently are currently having to live with. So Professor Yinka, to the extent that you can speak to the status of the investigation, can you please share with us where we are on that? Okay. All right. can't seem to, let me see if I can, so we can't seem to hear you. Can everybody hear her? Professor Yinka, I see that you're on the call, but we can't seem to hear you. Okay. All right, maybe once you're able to get your connection on, if you can just get back to me, and I will come right back to you. All right, but let me ask Dr. Joe a few more questions then.
Hello.
Hi, hello?
Hi, it's Chude.
Hi, Chude. I was trying to actually, thank you for being here. I was trying to reach Professor Yinka so we could get her on.
Okay.
Professor Yinka, can you hear us?
She's not on at the moment.
Okay, all right. All right, so let me go to Dr. Joe Odumakin, make sure that she's here. Dr. Joe? Yes, I see her. I'll mute you. All right.
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay.
All right. Can you hear?
Yes.
I'm on.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, and you?
Very well, thank you so much. All right, so as an activist who has been at this issue now for decades, I would say, right? You've witnessed the rapes, the murders, the dehumanization of women for such a long time. And so you obviously know that the recent spate of rape cases is not something that's new, right? So what have you identified as the reasons why these cases continue to proliferate in Nigeria? Why have we not been able to make any headway on the issue of rape and murder of women?
One of the major drives of this negative trend is the patriarchal system entrenched in Africa. The system that emphasizes the superiority of a male child over a female child. The psychological implication of that system of a female gender is very net because it inherently encourages the female gender at the subconscious level to be subservient to their male counterparts. So it batters their self-esteem when this happens. Another reason why these cases continue to proliferate in Nigeria is due to the undue, unrestricted exposures to the negative side of the internet. It's a known fact in Nigeria. It's a known fact that Nigeria ranks top 3 of the countries with high incidences of porn viewership. In 2014, the popularity of Nigerian Google searches for pornography, that's relative searches, on a large scale of 1 to 100 was above 80. So it shows that Nigeria ranks very high. And Google ranks 100 to any item that searches in particular country. Searches shows a voice with such popularity of pornography searches are like Lagos, Oyo, Delta Rivers, Cross River, and Abuja. So, Ruth, the relative popularity of rape pornography videos was above 80, with Lagos State leading. So we could see that from some of these cases
think we're losing your connection.
That I've referred to, for instance, even in always from hello.
Yeah, I think we lost you for a minute. You said some of the cases that you were referring to. Yeah.
Yes, in terms of patriarchy, in terms of pornography.
Hello, my brother. I am in the bushes, my brother. I am in the bushes. I am in the bushes, my brother. I am in the bushes. We got the free Wi-Fi up in here. You guys want some free Wi-Fi? Because I have the bushes Wi-Fi internet. You cannot mute me, my brother. You cannot mute me, my brother.
Nigga, silent. Nigga.
Nigga, I am a black man in African. I am in the village,
I
my
just want to
brothers.
apologize to everyone. We're trying our best here to
Suck my dick, you fucking bitch.
Nigger. By the way, jack off. He isn't
here.
Marcus. I'm Marcus. Trust me, isn't. Like,
Suck my fucking dick, you asshole nigga.
Hey, give me host. I fixed this for you. Give me host. I fixed.
Give me host. About that, Dr. Joe. We have some people
Yo, mama.
not part of this conversation.
you fucking bitch, nigger. By the way,
Shut the fuck up, nigga! Shut the fuck up!
Nigger. Black man.
We try to
Nigger. Black man. Nigga, black man. Nigga, black man. Black.
You have to press Alt plus F4 to fix it.
Nigga. Nigga, black man. Black man. Nigga, black man. Black man.
Thank you all for your patience. We are going to get through this. We are going to continue and get through this.
Nigga, black man. Black man. Shut the fuck up. Shut the.
All right.
Give me the host and I'll help you get rid of the window.
Apologies again. We are.
You can actually press Alt plus F4 to get rid of them.
All right. Apologies once again. Dr. Joe, are you still with us?
I'm on.
All right. Apologies
Dr. Joe, mama.
to everyone. We are doing our best here to make sure that we actually are able to have this conversation. Thank you, Dr. Joe. Please continue. Dr. Joe, can you hear us?
Well, so in talking about the level of rape that we have, because a lot of people have access to internet, and popular pornography sites on the top 50 sites by Nigerians.
We can hear you, Dr. Joe.
Yes, the popular pornography sites among the top 50 sites visited by Nigerians, according to Index.com, is more popular than leading job sites.
Nigga.
So we see that through pornography, a lot of people have access.
Speak English.
Dr. Joe, are you still there? Dr. Joe, are you still there?
I think he left.
Okay. All right. Sincere apologies. We did try to prevent as much
it's okay.
as possible.
It's not your fault. It is not your fault. It's okay.
All right, Professor Yinka, let's see if we can come back to you. Are you still around? Are you still there? Can you hear us now?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience. We're doing the best we can. So one of the things I wanted to ask you was about the status, if you can give us an update on Uwa's case.
Well, to the extent I can give it, I can say that the state government is very much on top of the matter, as are the police. You probably know that the investigation is being conducted by the police at the highest level, that there's a team that has come in from the Inspector General here that is cooperating very much with the team that is based in Benin. We are also working very much with them. You know that ideally, prosecution investigators should work very closely together. But particularly in this instance, we are doing that because it is something that the governor is very, very interested in, because it is something that we totally abhor in this state. And he is definitely very, very horrified by what has happened. And the ministry is very concerned about criminal justice delivery. We need to ensure
more fucked up than the word fuck. 1 out of 4 women will be the victims of domestic violence.
Hello?
Sorry. Yes, we can hear you, Ma. Sorry about that.
Well, we got the point. Domestic violence is an issue. So, like I said, there is quite a lot happening. I can't really talk about details, but the state is very much on top of it, and I'm sure that in the next few weeks,
Sorry, Ma, you were saying in the next few weeks?
you will have some very verifiable facts. You will have information that is brought out through formal channels.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. So last year, I believe it was, Edo State domesticated the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, which expands the definition of rape. So can you tell us, for those of us who may not be as conversant about rape law, what is it that, maybe perhaps you can give us the distinction between what the VAP Act does in comparison to what the law was prior to that?
The VAP Act, I mean, is very good in the sense that it expands the definition, allows for many, many things that it disallows, rather, many acts.
Many acts.
In the area of rape, you have, for example, if, for example, there is an insertion, a person inserts a bottle into a female. In the old act, it would have been difficult to now start saying those were acts of rape. So any insertion of anything, for example, into a person is actually rape. And then it allows for indecent exposures. I mean, in defilement, it expands defilement. It expands. It's actually very different. It's wide. I actually am going to do a workshop on that as well, very, very shortly. But what I will say in a nutshell is that we have right now is we're not able to use it because of 1 or 2 issues concerning it. So we're trying to make sure that it comes out. We deal with those different issues so we can utilize it to its fullest now. So the laws that we're more likely to use are the Criminal Code and the Anti-Trafficking Law.
Okay, fantastic. Do you think that domestication will now allow us to increase the number of convictions? Because we know the conviction rate in Nigeria for rape is extremely low. Do you think that expansion and the domestication of the VAP law now in Edo State will now allow us to increase the number of convictions? And will it change the way that cases are prosecuted and investigated?
Well, there are some problems. One problem is that the criminal justice system is very, very slow. That's one big problem that we have in Nigeria. What the VAP law does is to is to create a more sensitive environment. It is to ensure that many acts that currently are not criminalized are actually criminalized. That is what it's going to do. But it is through efficiently investigating and efficiently prosecuting that, we will actually get far more convictions. We also need to change attitudes, because attitudes play a very big role. You know, there are very, very many people who get raped and don't report. And that itself is a big issue. It's a really, really major issue. So we need to ensure that people report, that they're not stigmatized. So those are areas, there are many different areas that we have to deal with. But there is the problem of low convictions, I will agree, but there's the even bigger problem of low reporting. We need to increase the reporting to a greater extent.
Okay. All right, so, you know, when we poll the survivors that we work with, right, when we ask them why they didn't report, many of them say that they don't have any confidence that the system will actually work for them, right? So, you know, in fact, I've actually heard people say that, but for the immense public pressure that came through social media on Uwa's case, this case might not have even seen the light of day. What is your response to that sentiment? I mean, and how can we start to get women and girls to have more confidence in the system that they believe has failed them?
The system has to prove itself, talking very, very frankly. It is when we see successful cases that people will have more confidence. But when you have a situation where you go and report, and then first of all, you start off very often with the mother asking, what did you wear? What did you do to provoke this rape? And then you go to the police station and you don't really get people that are listening to you in any way. And then you move on, you find that the person that is coming and telling you to settle and just take money from the rapist is actually a lawyer who should be concerned about the defense of people's rights. And then you go to court and the judge as well says, look, go and settle. Or there are endless adjournments. Look, I mean, you've already gone through a great deal of trauma. You don't want endless adjournments upon adjournments upon adjournments, and then you have to pay for so many things. So it's a torturous process for many people. I mean, I'm on the government side, but I have to say that there are many things that we need to change. These are all tied up with the problems of criminal justice delivery. And that is what we need to work at. So I would say that with time, people will come to see that we're really trying to make a big difference, because in my state and in other states in Nigeria, we are trying to make a difference and to make sure that victims are sensitively treated. Even in our response centers that we have just established, we try and make sure that they're treated with a sense of dignity. So once there's dignity and once the people are being supported, then I think we'll get far more people coming out. But the first thing is, let's not stigmatize them. Let's stigmatize the rapists.
And I agree with you on that. And I'm going to push back a little bit, because I think part of the issue is that the police, right, play such an integral role, right? They're really the first responders when somebody is raped, right? And so how is it that in your role as a top prosecutorial officer in Edo State, what can you do to ensure that we eliminate all the hiccups that police put in the way, all the roadblocks, you know, including, you know, mobilization money, you know, payments to have to, even to fill out a form, you have to make some sort of payment. We heard here in Uwa's case, the family members saying that they had this issue over and over again until the case actually blew up on social media. That was something that was a big, big concern. So how is it that the government and someone like that's in your role, what is it that you can immediately start to do that can help young women to move further and really take your word for it as you're articulating to us now?
Well, they have to look, I mean, watch us. Action speaks louder than words is what I will say. But again, the first responder, the first official responder is very often the police, man or woman that the person meets. But the first responder is very often a member of the family or someone around. And sometimes their responses are horrific. Only a few days ago, after Uwa's death, there was a true story of the woman who beat her little child who was 2 years old, who was sucking a man's penis. Yeah. You saw that now. That is a huge attitudinal problem. That is a woman who does not see that there's something wrong with blaming a 2-year-old for performing an act on an adult man. So those are things we have to change as well, because the victim comes in already shamed in many instances. So it's a huge, I'm not holding brief for the police at all, but they're from the same society. So we have to make sure that we don't blame the victim. That is the first thing. And we have to make sure that there is some sensitivity. But I also believe that it would be good to have a law in place that actually puts in steps what must be done and ensures that when a report of rape is made, that in fact, any reports that has to do with bodily harm of any sort is made, it is mandatory for the police person to immediately go to the scene of crime. We probably have to do some things that would be obvious in other places, but maybe are not so obvious with us. But the first thing for us is the attitude, I think.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Yinka. I know that you may not be able to stay with us for much longer, but if you can, please continue to hang on, because I know that people will have some questions specifically for you. Thank you, madam. All right, so Bishop Feb, let me come to you at this point. You and I both grew up in church. Everybody knows, pretty much who our parents were, but I think traditionally people have thought of the church as this very sacred space, but that really has more of a focus on individual salvation, right? There's not really been any, to a certain extent, and I'm not speaking broadly for all churches, right? But there's not really been a lot of exploration of that intersectionality between church and social justice. People tend to think of them as two separate things. Here in Uwa's case, unfortunately, she was assaulted and then murdered in a church, right? A sacred space, a sanctuary, as her family described it for her. So how do you see the role of the church, right, in preserving the sanctity of that space, right? Because I think, gone are the days of where the church can no longer speak to some of these issues. So can the church start to merge that intersectionality between social justice and salvation in the way that we see Jesus doing it, demonstrating when he was on the earth? Bishop Feb?
Thank you. I think that's a great question. The issue when it comes to the church and the role of the church, we have to look at Jesus Christ as the ultimate example. And Jesus Christ, if you live today, he would be someone who stood for social justice. He'd be someone who stands for right over wrong. He still does stand for all of these things. Christ is as the Son of God, stood for everyone that did not have a voice for themselves. And what the church is coming to the point of doing now in this day and age is that we need to stop allowing certain subjects to be taboo. So the issue of sex, the issue of rape, these are things which the church traditionally will say, okay, that's taboo, let's leave that out, or let's call it a small community to go and deal with it quietly so it can go away. And as long as we keep doing that, we will unfortunately empower people to keep on doing wrong things. Because the truth is that there are people who are evil, who do wrong things in the church as well. Not that the church is not calling them in, but the church is open to everyone. Mm-hmm. As we say, the church is a hospital for sick people. So if you want to come to the church, you will find many sick people in that church. And what we do as Christians and as pastors is we're trying to correct some of these things. Now, what we need to do in these next couple of days and weeks is to begin to open the conversation up so that it's no longer a taboo subject. Right. So if someone is sick, in the same way that you go to a hospital and you're sick, and you're sick of something like cancer, you don't say, well, because it's cancer, we can't talk about it, it's so bad. No, mm-hmm. Because you're in a hospital, you talk about it, and because you're there to get cured, you're there to get healed. So what I'm encouraging the church to do now is begin to look at these subjects and say, nothing really is taboo. Let's talk about these things. No matter how bad it is, let's talk about it, and let's begin to investigate, let's begin to pursue, let's begin to do the right things, because as Christians, that's what God expects us to do. Because the victim is in church. Many times the perpetrator is also in church. And so because of the position where a person might have, maybe the person is a big person in society, that person gets mm-hmm. to have that so they can hide in church. And that can no longer be allowed. That has to be a thing where we say, no, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're in church and you're a perpetrator, you're someone who is causing this kind of harm, we will deal with it. We'll expose it. We'll make sure that it's taken care of. But at the same time, too, while we want to try to heal you, whether victim or or a perpetrator, we still will make sure that you get what's coming to you. If you do something that's wrong, we're not going to hide you. We're not going to let the government say, okay, well, I mean, we're not going to hide you from the police or from the government. If you do something that's wrong and you break the law, you will be persecuted. That's what we need to get to as a church.
Right. But, you know, let me push back a little bit, right? As you expected, I'm sure. Why is it that the church does not speak about this publicly? You know, the way that, you know, as regular as tithing is, as regular as Thanksgiving services are, you know, why is it that we can't just say, okay, once a month, you know, the church will have a day that we actually use to enlighten people about rape, about trafficking, about, you know, issues that people are dealing with in their day-to-day real lives, right? How can we start to get more people? I mean, I know that at Church of God Mission, you know, we certainly endeavor to do that, right? But globally, when we talk about the church with a capital C, why is it that we cannot make this a priority?
Well, okay, once again, you're talking about the Church Universal, and the Church Universal tends to have certain things that are on our radar, that's on our front burner. So these are things we choose to talk about first. So issues that having to do with salvation, issues that having to do with tithing, issues that have to do with those kind of church issues. Those are the ones that we tend to talk about. But like you said, every issue affects every member of the church. So if I'm talking about Thanksgiving today, it's not going to affect. It doesn't affect every single person. There's someone in that church who maybe last night was molested or was trafficked or something. And these are all things that we need to deal with. It goes back to what I said in the beginning, that the Church Universal needs to begin to allow or not allow certain issues to be taboo. So when it comes to sex, you hardly ever hear a pastor talk about sex in church or talk about rape or talk about these kind of things because they've been taboo, especially in the African context. Mm-hmm. Now, in our African, we have to get away from that place where we hide certain things. If something does happen in church, then you will see those. Let's set up a committee. Let the committee deal with it, and invariably they will try to do what they can to hide it, or say, okay, let's quietly talk to the family. And we have to start saying, no, let's deal with it in the same way it should be dealt with in the public spaces, so that people can feel safe in church, so that a young woman can feel safe coming to the church and saying, this happened to me. Right. And that's what we get to. It's going to take some time to get there, but we will get there.
Okay. And we're going to hold you to it. We're going to hold you to it. You know I will, for sure.
Well, we're working on something along those lines. And I'll mention that later on when I get a chance. But
So, but just very quickly, you know, a few years ago, I wrote a poem called See Me, See You, right? And so part of the idea behind that poem was to say, look, every time as a man that you inappropriately touch a woman, you rape a woman, you molest a woman, you call a woman a bitch or whore, you are really giving permission to a man, to any other man, to do that to your mother, to your sister, to your daughter, right? So what is it that, I mean, you're a father of 3 boys. I only have a girl, right? But you're a father of 3 boys. What are you teaching your sons about the bodies of women, about the value, their innate value, right? And what should men be teaching their boys? I know that we obviously know that rape also happens to boys, but in the context that we're talking about here, which is primarily women, what should men be teaching their boys?
What we should be teaching our boys, and I do this to my sons all the time. I have two things I tell them all the time. Number one is this, that stop means stop. Number 2 is no means no. No is a complete sentence. It doesn't mean no, but, or no, I think this. The word no is the sentence, and it means no. It means stop. So I tell my boys that, and then I talk to them about this all the time, just like your poem says. We never touch a woman. So every time something happens, you think about your mother, because at the age where they are right now, the only woman that they know in that intimately is their mother. So whatever it is that you would not want anyone to do to your mother or say to your mother, do not say to somebody else. And as they grow up, talk about, and if they have sisters, I would have said the same thing about their sisters. But it's the same thing. We need to begin to teach our men from a very, very young age that no means no, stop means stop. A woman's body is her body. It's not yours. You don't own it. Fortunately, in Nigeria, they'll tell you, well, it's my wife. I can do whatever I want. No, it's not true. She is made by God in God's image, and so are you. And we have to have that respect. So that's a part of what I teach my young boys. And I'm doing it in church right now. Last week on in our services online and in our Zoom services, we did the same thing. We talked to try to educate young men about what's going on, because many of men have missed this from when they were children. And now at the age of 20, they're hearing some of these things for the first time. At the age of 25, at the age of 30, they're hearing these things for the first time. It's sad, but it's a sad truth, but it's true. So we just need to keep on teaching over and over again. I told a friend of mine, education is a continuous process. We can be angry that it wasn't taught, but it is our responsibility now to teach every young man, every young woman about these things.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. We'll come back to you, but Ireti, let me ask you, because you're a part of an industry, right, that has considerable influence on how women view themselves, right? As an accomplished actor and a producer, I know that you're very intentional about the roles that you take, but also intentional about the way women are portrayed when you're producing, right? But the overwhelming majority, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, and when I watch our films, our movies, are okay with portraying women as either a prize or as a hindrance, right? So something they have to get rid of, something that's in their way, their first wife or whatever the situation is, or as this glamorous prize that they win, right? And so you see that repeated over and over again. Do you believe that the industry has had or has a role to play in the way that women's bodies have become commoditized, right, and dehumanized in many ways?
Absolutely. I mean, outside, a good evening, everyone. Outside culture and tradition, media has contributed tremendously to when it comes to women. It's in our lyrics, the lyrics of the songs that we hear. It's in our storylines. It's in the fact that we seem to be unable to promote a song or an idea or a commodity without some scantily clad woman somewhere in the background. This in turn has affected the way that young girls are socialized. And this is also a reason why, like you said, she's considered a sex object or something to be acquired, or is never hardly seen as a full-fledged individual, legitimate aspirations of her own. Some of the problems we have in our industry when it comes to storytelling is the seeming inability to create strong female characters who are successful by the dint of sheer hard labor. It's always they're either successful because they're a witch, a bitch, or a whore, or because some man somewhere has bestowed that success on them. Yes, we've contributed to this tremendously, and yes, we can also help to dismantle all these things. It's simple. As individuals, just pick a side, and once you pick a side, let the content that you put out there, what's the word now? Let it reflect your thoughts. Let it reflect your position. Now, you can't censor art. You can't tell people what kind of art to put out there. But like I said, as individuals, we can do better. Just simply pick a side. When you're putting out your art, when you're creating your content, be conscious about the ideas that you're putting out there. Be conscious about the words that you're putting into a song. Be conscious about your female characterization. If you don't know how to write for strong women, there are people out there who have experiences that you can learn from and that you can draw from to create content that upholds the woman. So yes, we've contributed quite a bit to it, and we can also do a lot to take it down.
So, but how do you convince your male colleagues, right? Because they know what will sell. They know that if you put a woman shaking, her booty on a video, that's going on a film or whatever the case. If you put somebody that can be described as sexy and fresh or whatever the case might be, that will draw a bigger audience, right? And so, at the end of the day, the bottom line is money, right? So, how do you convince people who want to make a lot of money to pick a side? How do you, it's sort of like the discussion that's happening in America now. They say, you can't say, oh, I'm just not, I'm not a racist, right? You have to be either, the only options are, you either are a racist or you're anti-racist, right? So those are the only two options. How do we translate something like that where you can say, look, you either are an ally for women or you're the exact opposite, right? Because it takes courage to, in boardrooms, have these conversations where people are making jokes about the bodies of women. And we know that all of these things, once they become normalized, right, they translate into society where women are then seen as objects. And then the next step from there, is men feeling that they're entitled to those women's bodies, right? How do you do that? How do you go about convincing your colleagues that, you know what, you have to do more, and when money is the bottom line?
Well, to be honest with you, it's a hard sell, especially when you're talking in numbers and big numbers, especially, and then you're talking to people who have been socialized in a patriarchal system.
Sorry, Riti, I think we may have lost you. Can you hear us now?
Not everybody will have a seat at the table, but you have some level of influence. Perfectly. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. We lost you for a minute.
Yeah, like I said, it's an uphill task. But if you find yourself in a place of position, if you find yourself seated at the table, use your position, use your power, use your position to advocate for policy that ensure that there are checks and balances in play. If you have the liver for it, you can say, and this is where big content bias come into place. You can actually put a policy in place to say that we will not be accept A, B, C, D, E. Just set yourself something that's going to go away pretty quickly. And that's just the honest truth.
All right, thank you so much, Iriti. Let me ask Chude a couple of questions, right? So you've obviously been a journalist for quite some time. And, but most of us, I think, came to really recognize your face, even if we were following your work. When, you did a high profile interview last year that related to a woman who was finally ready to speak her truth about some allegations concerning rape, right? So why was it important for you as a journalist to tell that story, to tell those kind of stories, right? And what is the role of the media in surfacing and then amplifying the voices of survivors, including boys, which we know are also much, we cannot remove from this particular conversation?
I think when you live in a society, in the companies I run, we've already had a 60% rate of women in leadership. And when people say to me that it's performative, I tell them that performance matters. Because if you live in societies that are historically exclusionary, then you have a duty to be proactive in bringing in excluded voices. Like, you can't, it's like white journalists saying, oh, we can't find a woman CEO, and say, well, you have a responsibility because you live in a society that excluded women's voices to find those women. So anybody who understands the true role of journalism knows that historically, it goes beyond reporting the facts, beyond telling stories that appear to you. Your job is to actively find stories that properly reflect the breadth of society. Mm-hmm. And that's why women's voices have been excluded in this society, because we have a culture that silences the less powerful and minorities actively. It doesn't just, this is not unconscious bias, this is conscious. So the first problem is cultural. And often the media, when it is acting in default, reflects society's biases, yeah? But it's important for the media to understand that its job is not just defensive or reflective. Its voice is also offensive and proactive, which is this a just society? Is this an even society? Is this an equal society? And what do we need to do to make it that way? And then we begin to tell the stories that enable society become the best version of itself. So that's what the Bosola interview was about. It was shocking to me that up until that time, I couldn't find in our research any woman, any high-profile woman, or even not high-profile woman, who had accused a truly powerful man, not just a man who was powerful in her context, but a man who was powerful nationally. You know, nobody. And I thought that didn't make sense because obviously the rape numbers have always been high, even when the police and the law courts were not taking rape seriously, which they still aren't relatively. So for me, that was important. I thought, okay, this was a fine opportunity to try and begin to tip the scales. Yeah. And also it was important sadly, it mattered for the person who did that interview to be a man, sadly, to be a man who people couldn't dismiss as frivolous or emotional or any of those things, which also shows you the scale of the misogyny that underlines the silence of women. If it was another woman, you know, doing that interview, many men would have easily dismissed it. It was also tragic for me that after I did the first interview, there were other women who came out. And I began to look for women because I thought, look, I'm a man. There are some things that I just can't understand, even though I'm a journalist and I've been doing this for over a decade. So I wanted women to do the other conversation. Now, women journalists were telling me that people wouldn't take it seriously if it was a woman talking to another woman. I just found it really dispiriting on so many levels. So the real problem is that we have a culture of silence, an active, not just a culture where women keep quiet, but a culture that keeps women quiet. Mm-hmm. And so when you are in that culture, storytellers have a responsibility to keep tipping the scales until it is balanced. Mm-hmm. In fact, to even some, and unfortunately there will be some collateral damage, but to even aggressively tip the scales to the extent that people begin to cry out about a double standard. And then we know that we are beginning to have an equality of experiences. Somebody asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg of the United States Supreme Court, when will there be equality in America for women? Will it be when we have a woman president? And she said, no, it will be when we have as many women presidents as we have male presidents. So that shows kind of the responsibility that we all have as a society to balance that scale. It's too balanced to the left. It needs to be balanced to the right. And that's why I did that one.
Okay. And, you know, I think we've seen in recent years the power of social media, right, to really craft the political will of government, right? Because the power is really within us, within our hands, right? To be able to force our will. That's what political will is, the people forcing their will on politicians. And we've seen that in recent years and how that has transformed the discussion, how it's, whether it's through public shaming or whether it's just saying, look, you need to own this, right? And we know that has changed the discourse. It's changed the narrative for many things that would have gone complete opposite way, right? So how can we now, you know, get more journalists, right, to start to sign on for the long haul? Like, because we know that when it comes to rape cases or murder cases, like the one that we're dealing with, like some of the ones that we're dealing with now, Professor Yinka mentioned that it's going to probably take years for the prosecution. Because we don't yet have established special rape courts, right, which will expedite the process. How can we get other journalists, right, to commit for the long haul when we know that there are many other, you know, cases, many other news, clickbait or whatever, things that are a lot more interesting and superficial, right? But we know that people will likely, that are vying for their attention when these stories are so important.
It's the way that, you know, it's the way that society has always evolved, which is we need a few journalists to start. That's how it happens. It took the New York Times reporters who first dared to investigate Harvey Weinstein for the Me Too movement to catch fire. It just, the way society always changes based on pioneers, people who say, I will do this. And then other people now climb on the backs of that person to do even more. And so the more people we have, and just look at it, just think about it, just literally think about the exponential growth in percentages in the number of rape cases, rape stories that were told last year that led to any form of action, and the ones that have been told this year. Just because certain journalists have told certain stories beyond even Busola, others now understand that this truly matters, and how this. So rather than interviewing, I mean, there were times when you can go into a courtroom as a lawyer and say to the woman, why did you walk into his room? Why were you not wearing underwear? And now we've created a context where such questions in other societies will not be accepted. We've created a context where people saying, what were you wearing, at least on social media, is no longer part of acceptable public discourse. Mm-hmm. But it took a few people speaking first. So that's what we need. We just need to keep encouraging people to seek out those stories and to tell them. Mm-hmm. We need to keep encouraging women and men, but especially women, to come out and tell their stories. The more stories are told, the more stories get to be told. Like, it's almost the chicken and the egg. For more stories to be told, people just need to keep finding, keep searching, keep pushing, That's the only way society has ever evolved.
I think part of one of my biggest frustrations about the whole victim blaming in Nigeria is that somehow we found a way to make it culturally acceptable, right? So, it's almost as if we expect that there should be some percentage allocated to a woman or a man when he or she is raped, right? So it's almost as if, there's this implicit bias that has been built into the narrative in Nigeria to the point where, you hear about a rape allegation. If the girl comes out and speaks, it's almost automatically assumed that either she's lying or there must be something that she did, right, that contributed to it. If she does not speak, then they say, oh, it must not have happened. What took you so long? So how do you deal with that aspect of society that has adopted this sort of mindset as part of the response, by shifting part of the responsibility almost automatically to the victim or survivor?
I think I'm going to allow a space of compassion for people when it comes to this. Rape, the nature of rape itself is deeply complex. Often rape, there are no witnesses for the vast majority of rapes, because of the nature of sexual activity in and of itself, rape can be difficult to prove. So I'm going to give an example. I didn't believe that there was actually systemic police, and I'm a young Black person, so to speak, but I didn't believe there was actually systemic police oppression of Black people in America until Trayvon Martin's video. Like, I didn't. Like, intellectually, I heard it, but it didn't change my sentiment or my behavior. Each time I heard it, I thought it's not possible for a policeman to just randomly see a young Black person and shoot. He must have done something. I literally had to see the video to get it emotionally. And so I want to believe, and I do think it is credible, that the reason why many people quickly go to victim shaming is because we can't honestly believe how depraved many men are. We can't, honestly. We literally don't believe it when we say, this is how men have been for years. So usually human depravity is difficult to comprehend. We want to believe that human beings are fundamentally good, and they are. And so when we see something really terrible, we want to minimize, we want to deflect, we want to deny. And so the way that happens is we need to keep shoving these stories and images in people's faces. That's the only way. Human beings pretend, we pretend to be logical beings, but we make snap judgments all the time. One of the most powerful books on this subject is Malcolm Gladwell's 2019 book, Talking to Strangers. We only act when our emotions are affected.
Right.
And that's why journalists matter. That's why immigration wasn't taken seriously in Europe until there was that picture of the boy dead on the shores of Germany.
Right.
So journalists need to keep shoving these stories.
And I think the more that we tell these stories, like I think the point that you're making is that the more that we tell the stories, the more the stories will be told, right?
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. Professor Yinka, I'm going to come back to you. How can we make your work easier, right? I know you on a personal level. I know your level of commitment. I know your level of integrity. I know what you stand for and what you represent, right? But I wish we had more of you across Nigeria, but we don't. But how, for those of us who are fortunate to be in Edo State, and how can we actually make things easier for the prosecution of cases? Once a woman is raped and violated, or a man or a boy, what are the steps that they should take that ultimately will make your work easier?
Thank you very much. This actually is a great question, because what I'm trying to develop right now is what I'm calling, right, for want of better words, a rape protocol that will be just a very simplified procedure that anyone can follow when you see a rape victim. So it will have to do with what to do if, say, you're a parent and a person comes to you. What do you do? What do you do if you're the police? What do you do if you're the first responder and you're a hospital that is far away from us? I'm trying to see how we can ensure that there are rape kits all over the place, because right now we don't have any. They will make it a lot easier for us, because it really means that, for me, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that with things like rape kits, you can actually even train the local midwife to ensure that if a rape is brought to her, this is what she needs to do. She doesn't have to clean up the victim. She has to make sure that she takes swabs, she takes samples from the victim. She has to make sure that the victim removes the clothes that she has been wearing during the rape on a piece of paper, a particular piece of paper, so any hairs and anything can drop on. So different things. I mean, the protocol, I think, will help. But for everybody, generally, I think speaking and if we all talk out, I think voices need to be amplified. So people can realize that, oh, even though this is what I secretly believe, but it's actually not politically correct for me to believe this. And so they will act differently. At least they'll pretend, first of all. But hopefully they will improve later. So if you speak out, it'll help. And obviously, if you walk your talk, and we all walk our talk, I think, it'll help everybody. It's a question of changing.
Sorry, I missed the last thing you said. It's a question of changing.
It's a changing society. That's what we have to do. People have to simply learn to do the right thing. So when you have the rape kits, because I saw something flash just now, so I'll answer to it. The rape kit is supposed to be now wrapped up and taken into the investigators, so that correct forensics and DNA analysis can be done, so that the perpetrator can be apprehended. So it serves a very practical purpose.
Right, but I think what the question somebody is asking here is almost insinuating that, are they really just for show, right? Is it just to make the victim feel as if, yeah, something is being done, but nothing is really going to happen? And I always like to describe a lot of, the reason why a lot of us, have this sort of mindset is because we're really suffering from political trauma is how it should be described, right? Just the experiences that we've had in, over and over in ways that, Nigeria unfortunately has failed its average citizen in certain respects, right? So that's why you have people that can comment and say, I mean, why are we even, is this thing just for show? Will it actually lead to anything?
Look, we all have a responsibility, I think, to a great extent, that in Nigeria, a sort of, I don't want to call it skepticism, but there is it a sense of hopelessness sometimes? I mean, or a healthy disbelief, very unhealthy, sorry, not healthy at all. Yes, you can do something. You can. I really don't see why I'll spend money to go and get a rape kit and not give it in to the investigator. If I do give it in and it's taking too much, then talk. Everybody should learn to speak out. After a particular time, you should come and talk. If you talk to NGOs that have been successful in this area, you'll find that they have had to push. In the beginning of anything, or when you're trying to change attitudes, or you're trying to make people behave differently, you have to push. There's no way out. As regards taking DNA and forensics, yes, we don't have a DNA lab, but you do have suspects. So you'll be able to know that this suspect is actually the person that did this crime. So we will start somewhere. We will start somewhere. If everybody sits down and says it's a hopeless case, then things will be terrible. You can't do that in any society. It's just not the right way.
Right. And then the last question I have for you is that, yesterday the Director General of NAPTIP was suggesting that we need to create special rape courts, right? So in Edo State, we already have our own special trafficking courts, which expedites the trafficking cases. What do you think of that idea? Do you think something like that is necessary? And would it make a difference if we're actually able to develop something like that? Would it give more confidence to people to actually come out and speak about their assaults?
Well, again, I'm back to attitudes. We have family courts already, but that doesn't stop a policeman making some snide comment or nasty comments to a person when the person is raped. That does not stop a judge saying, go and settle and come back here. So these are attitudinal things we still need to face. And of course, having special courts does not make the criminal justice system go faster. So these are all things we need to address, because the system has to be fast for everything. It's good for it to be fast for things like rape, because it's highly traumatic, but it's also pretty traumatic when it's a straight murder and there are family people involved. So there are some big systemic issues that we have to deal with, but we have to start somewhere. And it helps if the people are aware and they keep people in government like myself or other people on their toes. Everyone should be kept on their toes in the three arms of government. So informed talk, informed discussion, informed criticism for me is very, very helpful. It'll help the system, but nobody should give up.
Right, but then whose responsibility it is to train? We know that police act a certain way. That's probably the reason why most people don't feel like they will have access to justice. Isn't it part of the government's responsibility to say, if we know we have a problem, when is the training going to happen that can start to actually change some of that mindset, right? That whole, family issue, go and resolve it with your family. When you have, 2-year-old that was raped by a father and somebody's telling you, it's a family issue. How is that a family issue? That there's obviously a lot of mental issue in the situation, but isn't it the government's responsibility to ensure that training is done? To require people that we know that if you have implicit bias, and I keep using the examples of what's happening in the US right now, people are saying we will not allow you to continue to degrade and treat Black and brown people the way that you are. And so you now see police departments that are overhauling their system, that are going to demand that if you are a bad cop, a bad officer, you are removed from the system. How can we start to make people accountable when reports are made and we just see the same thing happening over and over again? When is the training going to actually happen so that we start to see the change that we want and the people are actually requesting?
Well, training has already started, actually. I know that there are different types of training going on. I know that the rule of law and anti-corruption that has intervened very positively it's a program that has intervened very positively in Edo State, is conducting different trainings around. I know that there are other organizations that are involved in this, the UNODC, the ICRC. There are different trainings going on, and the government itself is doing that in different states. It's a process, like it's a process. So we've started. That is actually what I want to say. We just need to continue. And we need to realize that the change we're talking about in America that we're seeing now has taken decades to come about. I mean, we saw the lying report that came after those policemen killed George Floyd. We saw. I mean, so that is what would have happened if something fundamental hadn't occurred. I see this very much as a season of change. I mean, these are some of the changes and alignments that have got to happen right now. Post-COVID, there will be some fundamental changes if we allow them to happen. So we should continue to push and we should continue to strive. For me, I believe that UWA has not died at all in vain. And we have to there are suspects, the police is continuing, and definitely something will come up of it. And I think with all the other cases, something will come of them. And gradually, we will be building up a DNA database, and we will be building up all the different things that we need. The sexual offenders register is something, we've already got one at national level. We have one in Lagos, we have one in Ekiti, and we are in the process of getting one. I should say by September, we will have one that is linked to the national database. These are all beginnings, you know. You do not despise the day of small beginnings. And that is what we have.
Well, you know, Professor, you know that we will certainly be following up with you on that. We will certainly be, you know, asking you the necessary questions because this is, I mean, it's such an important subject. And I wanted to thank you for the time that you took to join us today and for sharing your wisdom with all of us. We appreciate you, and we wish you all the best in your continued work, not just on the, everything else that you're doing, but also particularly with trafficking, where we work closely. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, so let me come to Dr. Kemi. You know, you are a survivor, right? This was unfortunately something that was written into your life story. You're now a psychologist working with survivors of not just sex trafficking, but also rape and trauma in all the forms that it appears, right? I'm interested to know, you know, as a survivor first, you know, how have you gotten to the point, right, where you've been able to heal, right? Because like I said earlier, the overwhelming majority of survivors will not have access to justice. Most of them won't even report the case. And we're talking about millions and millions of women. You know, there's several dozen women on the call now. That means, you know, 1 in every 4 of us has had rape also written into her life story, right? How is it that you have been able to overcome all of this without necessarily even having the access to justice, which is, like I said, the majority for most survivors?
Okay, thank you, Barrister Ruth. Incidentally, I wasn't even looking for justice. I was looking for healing.
Yeah.
For me, it was more like, how do I move on? And at the point when I was looking for moving on was at the point where I was at the lowest ebb. I was battling anger, I was battling mood swing and quite a lot of other things like that. The low self-esteem was so terrible. But then I started a process by the time I got to understand that I could not naturally just continue like this. And so that means invariably I had to begin to put my life into perspective. And so I got some help through one or two other people who were able to help me pull through. And then one thing that I was made to understand, first of all, is that one, it's a process. And so I shouldn't be too eager to overcome it. It comes and it goes. Up till 2 years ago, I was still having this strong hate against this man who actually sexually abused me. And so it goes on. But one thing I needed, one, was that I talked about it. I found out that in talking about it, there is a relief. And then funny enough, your program was the first place ever that we had in Lekki. It was the first place ever that I talked about it publicly.
Yeah.
Before that day, I had, you said?
I said, I remember that. I remember
yes,
that.
Before that day, I had never shared it anywhere. But I didn't know what got into me that day. I spoke about it, and it was like a burden was lifted. The guilt flew away. And then it gave me opportunity now to start opening up more, tell my story, share my story with people. And then I became a source of help. So as I was helping people to heal, I was healing myself. And that helped me very, very much. So I was able to acknowledge that this actually happened. It was not a dream, but it was my reality. And so I needed to deal with my reality. Then one other thing that helped me, or that would help people, is to take control of their thoughts. Oftentimes, your thought pattern, your thoughts, that we have control over our thought, and so you could veer your thoughts.
Let me interrupt you very quickly, because I don't want to move. I think I want people to have an understanding, particularly the men and who are on the call that can teach some of these things to their sons. And again, I'm not invalidating the experience of men and boys, obviously, but this conversation is mainly focused on what is happening to the women who are the overwhelming majority of rape victims in Nigeria. Can you just help us understand from a psychological point of view, what exactly either yourself or the survivors that you've worked with through Pathfinders or other organizations, what exactly does rape actually do to a woman when she has that experience? Describe for us so that people can really get a better understanding, because I think sometimes we lack the empathy, right? Because you may not have been a survivor of rape, so it's hard for you to comprehend, the same way Chude was saying, he didn't really understand racism in Nigeria, in the US, because that was not his lived experience, right? So help us to understand that for somebody who has actually been victimized in this way, what does it actually do? What does it rob a victim of? And in what ways does that actually, is it reflected as they get older?
Okay, one of the greatest things, or one major thing that happened, and I recall it happened with me, was that initially I froze, and it became unreal. It was like it wasn't happening. So I was battling through, is this my reality? Is it actually happening? And quite a lot of people, especially people that happens to them, is that they freeze. And then it now moves on to this feeling of being violated. For quite a lot of people, they feel dirty. So for a lot of people, they feel ugly, they feel ashamed. That feeling comes because you feel like something terrible had happened to you that shouldn't even happen to anyone. So most people feel ashamed and feel violated. And then there's this self-blame. You start wondering in your mind, was I the one that actually made this to happen? Did I do anything particularly to make this to happen? Because I kept thinking in my head then, what did I do? Was there something about me? My case was peculiar because as I was living in Lorry, where the first act happened, I came home, I couldn't tell anybody, but I was just trying to take solace in novels and things like that. I went to the place where I usually get it, and then the man hugged me and forcefully kissed me again. And then in my head, I was like, something must be wrong with me. And so for quite a long time, I was carrying guilt. And so for quite a lot of people too, they carry guilt, a burden of guilt, a load that they carry because they feel something was, or they actually caused this or made this to happen. And so for some other people too, anger comes in. They feel so angry with the world. My case, I was angry with my mom because I felt she should have seen this. She should have noted it. She should have observed it. So a lot of people are very, very angry. They become hopeless. And one important thing that also happened is this issue of self-esteem. It usually takes a nosedive because you see yourself as being violated. You see yourself as not being worthy. You see yourself as something is wrong with you. Automatically, your self-esteem goes down. And so for quite a lot of people, they are not able to opt and move on again because they feel something is wrong with them. And so for some people, they start failing in school. They are not able to form relationship. Some people go into anxiety. They see men, their head starts, they start having tremor, palpitation, because they feel it's going to repeat itself again. Some people have nightmares and they can't move past that. Some people can't go into depression, depressive feelings, and a whole lot of other things like that. So these are some of the emotions that people pass through, and it's even moved into, I've seen quite a lot of people who even till now can't get married, or because they were sexually violated when they were younger. So it permeates from childhood even to adulthood.
Right. And that's one of the things I wanted to emphasize, right? Because there is this post-traumatic stress that comes along with it. And, you know, from speaking with survivors, it's something that you hear over and over again, right? So when we look at a young woman who is a teenager and, you know, appears to be promiscuous, right? Is, you know, the inclination is for many of us to just look, Ashao, she's this, she's that, but there's usually something behind all of that, right? This is where we have to start to ask questions and not just make assumptions about young girls, right? Because a lot of times what's underlying has been some sort of assaults, and particularly when we know that 1 in every 4 girls in Nigeria, and again, I think those numbers are actually quite low. I'm sure it's even more than that, because the overwhelming majority are not reporting because of this culture of silence that we have created, this, you know, victim blaming, all the shaming that comes, and the refusal to reverse the stigma, right? So what I want to ask you, I think, is, part of what you were responding to already, in light of the fact that most of these young women are not going to have an opportunity to access justice, right? Most of these young women, and as a matter of fact, don't even have an opportunity to confront the person who assaulted them. Some of them will have tried to speak to their mother, to speak to a teacher, and they were not believed. So essentially you have this issue. You know, people think, you know, the pink elephant in the room, whatever you want to call that, that really is a hindrance in many ways to your healing, right? Because we know that once you have an opportunity to speak, once you have an opportunity to be heard, once you are believed, once you have access to justice, these are all things that expedite the healing process, right? But the overwhelming majority of survivors in Nigeria will not have that. So how do you move forward in spite of that big roadblock in your way? How do you overcome some of these things when nobody believes you, when your perpetrator is still there every day? It's your father, it's your uncle, it's the person that your auntie is still telling you, sit on the person's lap, go to the person's store, go and buy this from me. When that thing is still staring you in the face every single day, how do we overcome?
Honestly, it's difficult. Like I was saying earlier, for a long time, I carried AIDS. There was a strong hatred I had, which was just in my heart, and it was not allowing me to move forward. For quite a lot of people, the healing process takes time. And if you don't talk about it, you can't heal. The place to start is a place of talking about it. Then the question we now start asking is, who do you tell? Because oftentimes people don't believe your story. People would even ask you, what were you doing there? How come you went there? What did you do? Why didn't you run? You know, quite a lot of judgmental attitude. But then look for someone who you can confide in and share your story. That would help you to be able to pull through. That is the place where healing starts. And then in your mind, they would get help for you. Usually people who have been sexually violated may not be able to go through the process on their own. They might not be able to heal just alone. So they need someone, they need an anchor, they need a place of safety, a circle of support that would help them to be able to heal. And then part of the process is to help them acknowledge what had happened, to also be nice to themselves. One of the things that people who have been sexually violated does is that they are not nice to themselves. They are always very horrible to themselves. And so oftentimes they say very, very negative things about themselves. So you be nice to themselves. And you know one important thing that also found to help, and I've also told everyone I've worked in, is pleasing. Oh, somebody will ask, how would you do that? When you forgive, honestly, you are not just setting that person free. you are also setting yourself with yourself, you feel much exposed. The justice told us earlier, the process is slow. Sometimes it takes years. And so you might not even get the closure that you want. You might not get the punishment for that person that you want. But then you must keep living. You have to go on with your life. It might be difficult, but then you can do it. Over the years now, I have been able to do it, and I've gotten to a place where I can talk about my story. I can help people go through whatever it is without necessarily feeling any hurt or any sense of hatred. Yes, it happened. I have accepted that, but I've also made a caution in my heart. It won't happen to my children, and it won't happen to anybody around me again, because I am more prepared even to handle situations like that.
Wonderful. Can you tell us, for the parents that are on the call, right? Pause my frustration a lot. And, you know, people always tell me I'm a helicopter parent. Even my daughter loves to call me that, right? Because I'm so careful about who I leave her with, who's on her phone, what she's watching on the internet, and, it's almost as if, maybe it's because I'm a little paranoid because of the work that I do. What should parents be doing? Right? Because I think, sometimes, we have this idea in Nigeria that people can send their children, on summer holiday, 2-3 months, they won't even make a phone call to see how the child is doing. They can leave the child at home with the house help, who's a young man, the child's 4 or 5 years old, no cameras, nothing for, days at a time. What should parents be doing? And if you believe that it's their primary responsibility, you mentioned your children, what should parents be doing to protect their own kids from being victimized in this manner?
Importantly, be your child's friend. That's where you start from me. Let them know you as a friend that they can open up to all the time. I never had that, and that was one of the major problems in my life. My mom, it's not as if we're Feb. I grew up with my grandma, and by the time I came back to stay with them, we were not even just close. So I couldn't even confide in her. Forget the other things. But please be your child's friend. Let them open up to you. And then please opt as early as possible. We must begin to teach our children boundaries. Let them know there are certain places that anybody can touch. I tell them it is not Tonto, it is penis. People call it different names. Please let them know the names of those things. Because when the mother felt it was just an ordinary I was talking about, please let them know the names of those things, at least the age-appropriate name that they can deal with and they can relate with. And then please let them know that they can confide in you. They can always, perpetrators will threaten. And then they will tell you, I'm going to kill. Let them know nobody can kill, and then they are safe, and then you can always take care of them. So please create an enabling environment where the child can come to you. Teach them what they need to know. And please ensure that if you're going to leave, or if you must leave your child with anybody, please be sensitive, be aware. Understand the mood of your children. Some parents don't care. They come back very late. Yes, I know the Nigerian factor, but please just connect one way. Find a way to connect. She talked about the cameras. Put it there if you must. Then if your child will go on a distance holiday, be sure of the people that are there. Unfortunately, children have been violated even when they go and visit grandmothers and grandparents and things like that. And that's also a major problem. So please be sure. For me now, taking my children far away without being there might not be totally possible. Yes, we enjoyed that when we were growing up, but the world has changed. And there are a lot of people with evil intent who don't want what you want for your children. So we must create an enabling environment for them to talk to us, and also to make sure that we protect them as much as possible.
Okay. So please feel free to ask any questions here. This is, I really wanted this to be a safe space for survivors to start to find healing, right? So, many of us here, at least one in every 4 of us, and 1 in every 10 boys has gone through this experience. And so this is not, this is where we can start to get answers. This is where we can start to get healing. There's a comment here that says, Kemi is right. The feeling of anger, hate, low self-esteem, and total disdain for sex follows. There's a problem in some marriages where the women were not healed psychologically and she carries the pain and disdain to her marriage, and the innocent husband begins to bear the brunt of someone else's crime. I think that's, I think, I forget who says this quote, but there's a quote that says, hurt must be heard to be healed. Hurt must be heard to be healed, right? And so when we think, okay, this thing happened to me, which is very common, you'll have a child who's been abused in Nigeria, and you'll hear parents, don't ever speak about this thing again. And they don't realize what they're actually doing to their children when they tell them that, because you're forcing a child to try to ignore this roadblock that is going to get in the way of not just their sexual relationships with or marriage, but also even just in your day-to-day relationships with another girl who's a friend, with another man who's a friend. And so I think we have to get to the point where we have to be able to have these conversations. But the question I want to ask you, Dr. Kemi, is that if there are people on this session that have had children that have been molested, right, or that currently have children that have been molested, what can they start to do? Because, like you said, the worst thing you can do is just try to squash it. What can people who have had either themselves or they currently have children who have been sexually molested, how can they start to help them heal?
Okay, like I said, oftentimes people who have been molested need help. And so you as a parent should not threaten the child. Make the child feel comfortable to be able to accept the help. Oftentimes parents sometimes compounds the problem. So if you have a child who has been molested, please reach out to a professional, a clinical psychologist who will be able to help you talk. And then incidentally, again, I would say that it is not even all professionals that could help a child go through this. So you must be able to identify an appropriate professional for your child who will be able to understand what the child is going through, who will be able to help your child go through the process effectively, and also be patient with the process, because it's not an healing that takes place in 1-2 months. For some people, it takes years. Some people carry it into their marriage and things like that. You see them be moody and quite a lot of other things like that, not wanting sex. So you must first of all identify appropriate help, and then get help for that child. And then we had quite a lot of other outfits, organizations that could help. The PATHFINDER Justice Initiative has been doing quite a lot. I am part of this, and then we've been doing quite a lot with some of these people, and we have lots of success stories. And so we have the Mirabel House Center, which is also in Lagos, the Warif. We have the Genesis House, and then the Real Women Foundation, Stand to Head Rape. So you could also just liaise with any of these organizations who will be able to link you up with people who can help, and then they will be able to find help for your child as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Kemi. We have on the screen, you should be able to see the various resources for survivors of sexual assault. I will also be posting this on our social media, on my pages. So if you know somebody that may need help, that is struggling through this on their own, please be sure you help us share this information and get it out. Ireti, thank you so much for staying on the call. We're going to be wrapping up now, but I wanted to ask them, our remaining panelists, what is the one thing that each of us can start to do today, that we can actually start to do today to change the narrative of rape in Nigeria? Ireti, if you could answer.
Okay, as individuals, we need to take control of our personal spaces. If, like I said before, if you're a person of influence, make sure that your stand is clear. If you have zero tolerance for the denigration of women and children, there's a large chance that your followers will do same. If you are an employer of men, ensure that you create a safe space for your work. Ensure that you create a channel whereby in the event of an assault or a rape case or someone is molested, they can come and report without fear. And justice must not only be done, but must be seen to be done and swiftly. So one of the questions that you spoke about earlier on was the young clicking buttons and liking and retweeting, which is also very powerful in this day and age of social media. Get involved in advocacy. We don't all need to open up an NGO. There's several existing bodies who do the work. Join, get involved. There's so much work to be done. Not everybody is going to be on the front line. There are people working assiduously in the background. Find where your strengths are. Find a place where you can work. Find a place where you can contribute. Some people are, I call them first aid people. They're out there in the open. They're accessible. You can talk to them. Those are the first people you meet, and they can now send you, or what's the word now? Refer you to people like you and other organizations who are on the front line and do the work long term. So each person who has taken a stand has to be responsible. Take control of your immediate environment, spread the word, have zero tolerance for these acts. Let it be known that you have zero tolerance for these acts, and make sure that the people who follow you, who support you, who say they believe in you, also do same.
Thank you very much. Dr. K, I don't know if Professor Yinka, if you're still on, if you have any last thoughts on what each of us can individually start to do today to change the narrative in Nigeria. All right, Dr. Kemi, your last thoughts on what we can do. Oh, sorry, Professor Yinka is here. Your last thoughts, Ma, on what each of us can start to do today to start to change the narrative of rape in Nigeria.
Well, again, I mean, I guess that everything I'm saying points in the same sort of direction, so to speak. I think that the first thing we all have to do is to speak out. Those of us who are aware should speak out and make sure that the voices of ignorance do not crowd out the voices of knowledge. We also need to realize that we have to give comfort and support to people who end up in this particular position, knowing that there's so many people, apart from those that are, I mean, raped, those who have been defiled in some way. If you add those ones, then the figures go up tremendously. So I think it's support, and it's changing the narrative generally around talking and walking your talk. I think that's what I'd say.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ma. Dr. Kemi, I'll give you the last say, and then I will round up. Dr. Kemi.
Okay, hello? All right, so it's very important for every one of us to understand the pain and agony that people who had been sexually violated go through. And so we can be a support system. The next time you meet up with somebody, please show a love. Just be kind to them, appreciate them. And also, please, let's be our brother's keeper. The moment something like that is fishy, don't ignore. Please shout out, cry out. There's a need. Even if it is not true, eventually we can always apologize, but at least we know we have saved a life. So please and please, let's be careful. For parents, please, let's take care of the children as much as possible. Some children may not be able to overcome the trauma for the rest of their life. So please and please, let's do our part. Let's play our role.
Your mic is muted.
Barrister Ruth, your mic is muted. We can't hear you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. I was just saying, thank you. This is such an important conversation. And like I said, I'm hoping that it's a catalyst for additional conversations, right? So this should not just end with us today. Please continue the conversation. Please share the resources that we made available to you. So I'd like to end with, a quote of my own. With our efforts, may Nigeria soon see the day, may Nigeria soon see the day where no matter where you are, in the North or in the South, in the city or rural, Christian or Muslim, that every woman, every girl feels the safety and security that she deserves and is free from the risk of rape. So God bless you, and God bless Nigeria. Thank you all for joining.
Bye, good night.
Bye, good night. I'll unmute everybody so you can all say good night. And God bless everyone.
And good night. Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye. Good night, everyone.
Stay safe.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.